A political earthquake has shaken German politics as the AfD, once dismissed as a fringe phenomenon, suddenly achieved an unexpected victory, challenging the power of the major parties and turning the political landscape upside down, even in Gelsenkirchen a year ago. The SPD's stronghold with 70% of the votes was considered unshakable. However, in the recent local elections, the AfD was only 400 votes away from the SPD, reaching 29.9%, a clear sign of irreversible change. An unstoppable wave that is now penetrating the parliaments, city councils and district councils of the West. But this election victory is more than just a political maneuver. It is a deeply social, emotional sign of resistance against a policy that has overshadowed the concerns of ordinary people for years. The AfD, long mocked by the elites as an East German phenomenon, has reached not only the politically established regions in the East, but also the West. And that's no small change. It is the birth of a new political era in Germany. As the AfD triumphed, the old parties in North Rhine-Westphalia staggered. The Cdu, with its powerful Chancellor Friedrich Merz, dramatically lost support, achieving the worst election results in its history with only 33.3%. That was the moment when the expectations that Merz and his party had placed on their chancellor bonus burst. Instead of receiving a boost from Berlin, there was only a hard blow to the stomach. Voters reacted to the CDU's inability to address the actual needs of the population. While Merz was still trying to sell his successes, citizens on the streets and in the cities had to face reality. The CDU's policies do not care about the concerns of hard-working people. The hard struggle for jobs, the cost of living and social security was ignored. Even more dramatic was the decline of the SPD, the once proud workers' party that was deeply rooted in the heart of the Ruhr area. With a dramatic decrease of 2.2% to 22.1%, the SPD experienced the deepest fall in its history. What a tragedy, considering that this party was once the voice of the workers, the toilers, the common people. But while the SPD got lost in ideological debates, its roots, the working class, affected by deindustrialization, mass layoffs and dwindling jobs, disappeared. The SPD has failed to recognize the growing gap between the elites and the general population. It has alienated its own voters. But even more surprising was the crash of the Greens. The party, which was recently celebrated as the political future, lost a shocking 6.5%, landing at 13.5%. That is the moment when the media lies about the Greens as a party of progress burst. What was celebrated as a green wave is now a failed high-altitude flight that ended in a spectacular crash. They lost not only votes, but also their moral superiority claim. The reason? People were fed up with the Greens' bans, with the paternalism and the destructive climate policies that endangered their livelihoods. The voters in North Rhine-Westphalia, confronted with the Greens and their radical agenda, said enough. Voters did not want any further measures that would endanger their jobs, destroy their industry, and leave their children in overcrowded schools and unsafe neighborhoods. The Greens have failed to convey to ordinary citizens that they are truly fighting for a just future. Instead, they got lost in elite circles, and in the midst of all this chaos, the AfD emerged. A light in the darkness, a cry of the people. The party, which was still considered an outsider years ago, achieved an unprecedented election victory with an almost double-digit increase of 9.4% to a sensational 14.5%. This election victory, which far exceeded expectations, has shown that the AfD is not only successful in the East, but has also gained the trust of citizens in the West, a political earthquake that resonates deeply in society and leaves no one untouched. This election victory is more than just a political success. It is a movement that can no longer be stopped. It is the return to a policy that again cares about the real concerns of the people. It is the end of political arrogance and the return to a democratic system that respects citizens. The local elections in North Rhine-Westphalia have not only shaken the established parties, but have also marked the beginning of a historic change. What was considered a political outsider project a few years ago is now an unstoppable movement that is reshaping the political landscape. While the AfD is triumphing in the West, the old parties are staggering in a dramatic decline in their electorate, and the rift in German politics is becoming increasingly visible. The CDU, the party of the incumbent Chancellor Friedrich Merz, has suffered one of the worst defeats in its history, With only 33.3% of the votes, the CDU has reached a dramatic low. But what is the true meaning of this result? It is the death of the CDU, the People's Party that was once the central political force in Germany. This decline is more than just a number. It symbolizes the complete failure of a party that has ignored the concerns of citizens for years. Merz, who had staged himself as the savior of the party, could not deliver the urgently needed boost. Instead, there was only the hard receipt for a policy that had nothing to do with the concerns of ordinary people. But even more dramatic is the fall of the SPD, which has finally lost its historical support in the Ruhr area. The once proud Workers' Party, which formed the heart of German social democracy, is now a shadow of its former self. With a decline to just 22.1%, the SPD has achieved the worst election results in its history. And what did the SPD actually lose? It sold out and abandoned the working class. While the SPD got bogged down in theories about climate change and the transformation of society, it was the citizens in the industrial communities who suffered the consequences of deindustrialization and social insecurity. They were tired of being represented by a party that did not take their concerns seriously. And while the SPD is stuck in this existential crisis, the Greens, who were celebrated as the party of progress with their radical climate policy, have fallen even deeper. With a dramatic crash of 6.5% to just 13.5%, the Greens have suffered one of their biggest setbacks. This is the final proof that the Green Wave, which was still celebrated so euphorically in the last federal election, has not found sustainable support. The Greens have disenchanted themselves by putting their radical agenda before the needs of ordinary citizens. Their policy of bans and deindustrialization has alienated broad sections of the population who are faced with the real challenges of life, from rising energy prices to insecure jobs. In the midst of this political chaos, the AfD emerged. It is no longer just a party of Ossis, it is a pan-German movement that is prevailing not only in the eastern states but also in Western Germany. The AfD was able to record a sensational increase of 9.4%, leading to a record result of 14.5%. This is more than just an election victory. It is the beginning of a political revolution. What was once considered a fringe phenomenon has now developed into a serious political force that poses an existential threat to the established parties. The AfD speaks directly to the people who have been ignored by the old parties. It has embraced the concerns of the people and combined them with a clear, understandable message. It calls for an end to deindustrialization, a more restrictive immigration policy and, above all, a return to a policy that puts the normal citizen at the center. In a country that is increasingly alienated from reality, the AfD represents the only party that recognizes this reality and offers citizens a real perspective. But this success of the AfD has not only political consequences but also social ones. The voters have sent a clear signal. The time of arrogance and complacency is over. The citizens no longer want a policy that is made in elite circles, but a policy that has its origins on the streets, in the factories and in the households of the country. And the AfD has understood how to translate these wishes into political reality. However, the established parties are struggling with this new reality. They are trying to stop the AfD by all means, even by undemocratic means. The so-called firewall is intended to prevent the AfD from rising into the political mainstream. But these anti-democratic tactics are increasingly meeting with resistance. The AfD has not only won the support of the voters, but also the support of the rule of law. An example of this is the groundbreaking ruling of the Stuttgart Administrative Court, which declared the attempt to exclude AfD candidates from public office to be illegal. The true turning point in German politics is not only reflected in the election results, but also in the lived reality of the voters who live in the former working-class strongholds and former SPD fortresses. Especially in the Ruhr area, which was long considered the heart of German social democracy, the AfD has not only become a serious political alternative, but also the true voice of the working class. The cities that once stood as synonyms for the strength of the trade unions and the power of social democracy have now become symbols of a fundamental political upheaval. Gelsenkirchen, Duisburg, Essen. These cities were long the backbone of the SPD, but now they are also the new backbone of the AfD with record results that seemed almost impossible. In Gelsenkirchen, a city that was considered an impregnable fortress of the SPD, the AfD achieved a sensational 29.9%. That's a shock that resonates through the political landscape like a drumbeat. In this city, which once shone with results of 60 to 70% for the SPD, the AfD is now the political force that is challenging the SPD and is about to overtake it. This result is not just a number, it is a political earthquake. In a city that has stood for the labor movement for years, the AfD is now the party that addresses the real concerns of the people. Rising energy prices, unsafe streets, dilapidated infrastructure, overcrowded schools. These are all the issues that the AfD has focused on and that have slipped away from the SPD and the Greens in recent years. The citizens in the rural area no longer want a policy that ignores them and is mocked by the elites in Berlin. They are fed up with the parties that get lost in theory and lose sight of the practice of the working class. But this change does not only affect the SPD, the Greens have not been spared either. Their radical agenda of deindustrialization and their climate policy have alienated voters who are confronted with the real problems of life on a daily basis. While the Greens continue to rely on bans, the voters in North Rhine-Westphalia have made it clear that they no longer want a policy of destruction and reduction of their jobs. It is a cry of the people who work in the industrial areas and who are experiencing the dramatic consequences of the green policy firsthand. And this change is not just local, it is a nationwide upheaval that is being carried by the AfD from the West German cities to the rural regions. The party has established itself as the only force that is willing to represent the interests of the people who are disappointed by the policies of the established parties. In Duisburg, Essen, Dortmund and Herne, the AfD has achieved double-digit results that were unimaginable just a few years ago. But the party speaks with a clear, simple language that the citizens understand. It has not gotten lost in abstract debates, but has directly linked its policies to the concerns of the people. This success in the Ruhr area is particularly symbolic. The Ruhr area, which once stood for the pride of the German labor movement and the heart of German industry, has now turned away from the SPD and turned to the AfD. The voters here have sent a clear message. They are ready to accept the AfD as a political force because this party is the only one that addresses their real problems. In cities like Gelsenkirchen, where the SPD dominated for decades, we are now seeing how the political power structure is crumbling and the AfD is rising as the new force of the working class. However, the political tsunami of the AfD is not over yet. The rise of the AfD has not even reached its peak yet. If the AfD has succeeded in these former SPD strongholds, it is only a matter of time before it will be similarly successful in other parts of Germany. The political map of Germany will continue to change, and the rise of the AfD is the first step into a completely new political era. With each election victory, the AfD becomes an increasingly dangerous political threat to the established parties in Germany. Their impressive results in North Rhine-Westphalia, especially in the former strongholds of the SPD, clearly show that the party is no longer just a protest movement, but a real political force. While the AfD is becoming stronger and stronger in the cities and municipalities, the CDU is sinking further and further into the political abyss. It seems as if the political system of Germany is breaking into two camps. On the one hand, the AfD, which takes the concerns of the citizens seriously, and on the other hand, the established parties, which are losing more and more credibility. The reaction of the political establishment to the rise of the AfD is panicked. The old parties have quickly developed their defense strategy. They are resorting to all means to stop the AfD, including undemocratic and unconstitutional methods. The so-called firewall, which demands the exclusion of the AfD from all important political offices and bodies, is becoming the central instrument of the established parties. But what the CDU, SPD and the Greens hope for from this tactic is clear. They want to prevent the AfD from rising into the political mainstream and gaining serious power. But this desperate attempt to isolate the AfD is increasingly being exposed as anti-democratic. The voters have made it clear in every election that they are no longer satisfied with the established parties, and now the courts are also becoming active to ensure that democracy in Germany is not suppressed by a small elite. The Stuttgart Administrative Court recently made a groundbreaking ruling that declared the attempt by the old parties to oust AfD candidates from public office to be illegal. This ruling is not only a victory for the AfD but also a clear signal to the establishment. The AfD is a democratically elected party and its members have just as much right to sit in political offices as any other party. This legal success shows that the resistance to the AfD comes not only from the established parties but also from a part of the judiciary that is trying to suppress the political ambitions of the AfD. But despite these attempts, the party is becoming stronger and stronger. In recent years, the AfD has not only achieved political successes but also legal victories that further strengthen its position in German democracy. But this political success is not without consequences for the established parties. The CDU, SPD and Greens must face the bitter reality. Their power is waning and the voters are turning away from them. The CDU, which was long considered the People's Party, has lost its political dominance and has led itself into political insignificance. Merz and his party have failed to reach the broad population. Instead, the voters were led by the AfD to a new political force that stands out from the policies of the old parties. The SPD, which was once the largest political force in the country, has lost its identity and its voters. The former workers and trade unions, who once formed the backbone of the SPD, have turned away from the party. The AfD has managed to win the trust of these voters by addressing the issues that are really important to the working class: jobs, security, and a stable future. The Greens, on the other hand, are experiencing a dramatic loss of their political power. Their radical green transformation project, which relies on deindustrialization and climate protection, has proven to be completely unpopular. Voters are increasingly rejecting policies that endanger their jobs and their standard of living. The Greens are no longer the hope for the future, but a symbol of a policy that does not meet the needs of normal citizens. The rise of the AfD has not only changed the political landscape of Germany, but has also plunged the political establishment into a deep crisis. While the established parties of the CDU and SPD continue to falter, the AfD is no longer just a party of the fringe regions. It is a nationwide political movement that is perceived by voters as a serious alternative. Their clear message, which is directed against the established elites and the policies they represent, is increasingly resonating with the citizens. But the success of the AfD has not only political but also social effects. The old parties have long lost control of the political agenda and are now struggling to save their remaining support. The AfD speaks directly to the voters and responds to the most pressing questions that have been ignored by the established parties, from mass migration to labor market policy to the destruction of German industry through green deindustrialization policies. And that's just the beginning. The AfD has managed to develop into one of the largest political forces in the country, and its support is growing with each election success. But the party's path is not without resistance. The establishment, which has controlled political power for decades, sees the AfD as an existential threat. The so-called firewall, which was erected by the established parties, is intended to prevent the AfD from rising into the political center and further gaining influence in the Western states as well. But this resistance has only made the AfD stronger. The party has not only won the support of the voters but also the approval of the rule of law. The ruling of the Stuttgart Administrative Court, which declared the anti-firewall that wanted to exclude AfD candidates from public office to be illegal, was a monumental victory for democracy. It clearly showed that the AfD has the right to present its candidates and to hold public office, regardless of their political affiliation. In the midst of this political upheaval, fear is growing in the establishment. The established parties know that they cannot offer a serious answer to the AfD. Their policy of uncontrolled mass migration, the overburdening bureaucracy, and the destruction of German industry has led to a complete alienation from the electorate. The people in the country want a policy that protects their values and takes into account the needs of normal citizens. The historic election victory of the AfD is a clear signal to the established parties. The voters are ready to say goodbye to the old political elites and to give their trust to a new patriotic force. The AfD has established itself as the voice of the workers, the craftsmen, the families, the people who have been abandoned by the established parties. And the more these established parties try to stop the AfD, the stronger the party becomes and the clearer its message becomes. The AfD is no longer just a political alternative. It has become the only remaining force that holds up a mirror to the encrusted political systems of the CDU, SPD and Greens. The AfD is becoming the political center for those who no longer expect anything from the current government policy. It has captured the true pulse of society and shows the world that a fundamental political change is underway in Germany. The local elections in North Rhine-Westphalia and the unprecedented election results of the AfD are the final proof of a profound change in German politics. What was once considered a fringe phenomenon is now the new political center of the country. The AfD has developed into a political force that challenges the established parties and determines the direction of political debates. But this change goes far beyond a mere election victory. It is the beginning of a new era in which the voters are putting the political establishment in Berlin to the test and questioning the traditional power structure. This change is not welcomed by the established parties. Cdu, Spd and Greens are not only fighting against the AfD, but also against the public resistance, which is becoming stronger and stronger. The voters are tired of the political promises that have never been kept. They are frustrated by a government that does not care about the needs of ordinary citizens, but only represents the interests of elites and multinational corporations. But the resistance of the AfD is not only political, it is also social. The citizens, who feel abandoned by the established parties, give the AfD their vote because they believe that this party addresses the real concerns and problems of the people. The political rise of the AfD has profound effects on the entire political landscape in Germany. It is more than just a protest party. It is the party of the normal citizens, of those who have turned away from the arrogance of the old parties and who want a change. The AfD stands up for the interests of the workers, the craftsmen, the families who have to cope with the hard everyday life and feel disadvantaged by the policies of the established parties. And the more these parties try to delegitimize and exclude the AfD, the more the support for the party grows. But the rise of the AfD is not without challenges. The party must not only assert itself against the old parties, but also against the media, which repeatedly defame it as undemocratic and right-wing extremist. But the reality is different. The AfD is a democratically elected party that clearly distances itself from the extremist fringes of society and puts the interests of the people at the center. In a democracy, every party has the right to be heard, even if its ideas are uncomfortable. But the question remains, will this change finally displace the established parties? Will the AfD change the political landscape of Germany forever? And will the AfD really become the new bourgeois People's Party? A clear yes or no in the comments. This question will not only determine the elections in the coming years, but also the future fate of the country. Will Germany seize the opportunity to free itself from the encrusted political structures and take the path to a new bourgeois policy? But this change is more than just political. It is a social and cultural change. It is about whether Germany is ready to face the challenges of the future and not to put the people at the center who keep the country running every day. The rise of the AfD shows us that the silent majority no longer wants to be silent. The citizens have had enough of the political arrogance and the destructive policies of the old parties. They have found their voice and they want to be heard. The local elections in North Rhine-Westphalia show that the political change in Germany cannot be stopped if established parties such as the CDU and SPD ignore the concerns of the citizens. People are looking for alternatives. The AfD has established itself as a serious political force that puts the needs of the citizens at the center. This change shows the growing alienation of the voters from the old parties. Despite the resistance of the political establishment, the AfD has won the trust of many people. It is now the alternative for those who are disappointed by the policies of the established parties. This video is based on the most up-to-date information and sources available. Despite all efforts to present the content accurately and correctly, unintentional errors or inaccuracies cannot be excluded. We attach great importance to respecting YouTube guidelines, especially with regard to avoiding misinformation and maintaining community guidelines. We thank you in advance for a factual discussion and the exchange of different perspectives. What do you think of the increasing power of the AfD in Germany? Do you believe that it will change the political landscape in a sustainable way? Share your opinion with us in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more such analyses and discussions. Stay informed and give us your opinion.